It's time for your weekend fix of your favorite weekday shows on VSiN. From Follow the Money to My Guys in the Desert and everything in between. It's the best of VSiN, and it's on right now. We welcome in the gold contest winner-take-all, Mr. George King of Las Vegas. And George, welcome. And by the way, congratulations. You did a great job of handicapping, my friend.
Well, thank you very much.
Well, I was going to say, Brent, you know, this guy's a legitimate king. He's not like LeBron, self-proclaimed, and he didn't need somebody else to take the shot for him.
No, he took his own shot all season long. I have to tell you a little anecdote that I became aware of. Dave Tooley, of course, one of our VSiN writers, and does an outstanding job of coverage of contests, among other things, and you hear him on all our various VSiN shows. George, I'm told that he was actually watching with you on the final Sunday, that you two were watching as the games wound down, but you didn't mention a word to him that you had won the gold contest. You were keeping that little tidbit to yourself. Tell me about that.
Well, I was concerned about competitive advantage next year. First of all, nobody had connected the dots between SquarePants, which is my alias in the Classic contest, and There Can Be Only One, which is my alias in the gold contest. So initially, sort of a follow-through move. I just didn't want to give up that anonymity and still be able to use SquarePants next year. Also, I'm a lawyer with the federal government, and we've never had a super contest winner before, so I had to go through legal and media reps and all that to get clearance before I knew if I could do media. So for both of those reasons, I kind of kept my poker face on while we were watching the game.
Indeed. All good reasons, by the way, I might add. George, tell me, what 5 teams did you back that last Sunday in the Super Contest Gold that led you to the win? Tell me who you had that final weekend.
I had Carolina, Houston, Atlanta, the Colts, and Denver.
Denver.
Interesting.
Nice.
Huh?
Very good. Did you have those 5 in both contests?
I could have used a different strategy over in the Classic, but when it was coming down to the wire, I just used the same picks.
You did.
But I had 2 entries in the Classic, so what I did there, I hedged those. I figured if out of the 3 entries, I had a shot at about $900,000, but I also had a downside of about $3,200 if I lost the gold and both of my Classic picks cratered.
Right.
So I'm not very well off at the moment. I tried to retire early, and that sort of went sideways. So $40,000 was a decent recovery for me, so I locked that in by hedging those 2 Classic picks, and that cost me about $120,000.
You know, Brent, I'm so happy you shared that with us because, first of all, kudos to you and congratulations.
Yes.
I love when somebody engages or enters into something like this, and they really benefit for it. You know, if Bill Gates tells me he enters and he wins, I'm like, big deal.
Right.
But you know, I'm so happy. I just take me through your mentality or mindset watching the late game when you have this much hinging on it, because realistically, let's be real, most people are never going to be in that situation where you've got a several $100,000 swing based on 3.5 hours. Luckily, you had a Stanford guy going for you, so you liked your chances.
Well, in 2004, I almost won the Super Contest Classic, my first year in it.
Okay.
And I missed it by a field goal. I think I had the Jets, and they missed their field goal in overtime, and the Rams got theirs. And so I went from winning the thing with tiebreakers to finishing tied for 4th. That was a $220,000 swing on a missed field goal. That's 15 years ago.
By the way, nobody's seen that kicker since.
So
George sees him every day in his dreams.
So I'm a little bit philosophical when there's that much money on the line, at least not money I've put out, but money I could have won. And in this instance, at some point in the afternoon, I had a guaranteed $200,000 plus in the gold and whatever I made in the Classic. By the Sunday night game, I had $320 in the gold and whatever I made in the Classic. So I was sitting pretty good. When I walked up to Dave at the second half over at the Westgate, he's going, "You got butterflies?" And I got, "No, I've already got 6 figures," which was kind of a slip of the tongue because in the Classic, which is all he knew about, I really didn't have six figures locked in quite yet, but I knew I did. So yeah, he missed a couple of hints along the way.
Fascinating.
Now, I'm sorry.
No, please.
So was this your first year in the Classic? Because last year was the first year of the Classic. Did you play in it last year as well, George?
I've done the Classic all the way from 2004.
I'm sorry, and the Gold.
But the gold, last year I couldn't afford it. I couldn't get $5,000 together. This year I was scrambling, like we talked about earlier. I had a very good alias. There can be only one, which is perfect for that contest. And I wanted to use it before they expanded the prize pool out. And so I, did the seat cushions and everything and found $5K to get in there.
Hey, Brent, we're not getting this kind of return on Netflix or any of these other stocks the way he did in 17 weeks, right?
Yes, okay.
I mean, it's unbelievable.
George, if you have trouble getting a 5K to come next August, just come on down here, okay? I got a no-interest loan for you, my friend, okay?
That can be only VSiN.
George, I have a question for you without disclosing how you kind of come to this, but you being an attorney, obviously a cerebral guy, do you kind of use a combination of analytics, review data? What is kind of a mentality or approach that you use? And then did you play many Thursday night games, if any at all, throughout the course of the season?
No Thursday night games at all. I mean, I'm working, so
Sure.
Even with the sort of dumbed-down approach that I used for this year, it takes all that time for me to get through my process. I'm putting my picks in at 10:45 on Saturday morning.
Wow.
Every week, same routine. So
Same
you follow
routine every week.
routine like a ball player would follow.
It's very important. It's like I've trained the people at work not to ask me how I did because I don't want the highs of 5 and 0s and 4s and 1s or the lows to throw me off. So I basically just stick to my same thing. The week's over, you get ready for the next week.
So how many 5 and 0s did you have, George, in the goal?
That I can't recall. 'Cause like I say, I tend to forget from week to week. I know in the stretch coming down the stretch, I was 12-3, and I had a 5 and 0 in that stretch.
In that stretch, that final home stretch. And did you cash over in the Classic too with your 2 entries over there?
A little bit over $150,000.
And the gold paid how much to the winner?
$640, so I got $791 and change.
I knew it was good when Brent dropped the pen.
For somebody who has been very close to fumes a couple of times, I mean, my employers called me back from retirement twice, and each time it was like, yes, I don't care if it's football season, I'll come. To get that, it's a big deal. It's a very big deal.
Now, George, you have a bit of a Southern accent, I ask you. Baton Rouge, Louisiana. Right?
Yeah.
So did you grow up an LSU Tiger fan down there, or tell me about you?
We moved around a lot. I was born in Tuscaloosa, so I can always hedge my bets with Bama when they're winning, at least.
Right.
But I lived in Louisiana for most of my life.
By the way, Brent, if he didn't win this contest, I would have thought it was rigged. You brought in somebody from the SEC today.
Well, I feel bad.
Yeah. George, I'll lick at our wounds.
Do you participate in college football?
Not at all.
No, just strictly NFL, pro football.
When I started, I wasn't out here, so I didn't have a bunch of sharp inputs. So I just looked at 32 teams versus 120 teams. It seemed like less of a workload. Now, I mean, the conventional wisdom out here is college is easier, but I'm so locked in, and I do fairly well with the NFL, so I stay with it.
Good for you. Good for you.
George, let me. You said something to me before out there that fascinated me because there is so much chatter. And I tend to listen to chatter, and I tend to read what everybody's got to say. And who does this guy like? Who does that guy like? You operate differently. You tend to close things out, right? So that
Correct.
You're just focused yourself on how you like to handicap games. Do I have that right?
I stay in my process. If it's good, I'm afraid it'll knock me off. If it's bad, I don't want it bouncing around in my subconscious as I'm cutting down to 5 picks.
However, there was one VSiN show that you did like, and that was Between the Sidelines with Matty Humans, right?
Yes, in week 17, I was able to get through my process, as it were, on Friday. I still wanted to get some input on like Buffalo, Miami.
Right.
So I spun that up off the archives, and it was the Between the Sidelines with Scott Kellan, Aaron Renning, and Matt Humans. And
good handicap.
It was a very, very good program. I mean, it's the kind of thing, if I needed help, I definitely would have looked there. And even if I didn't agree with everything that they specifically talked about, I had all my yeah buts already in place, and it was good to sort of have them as a foil because for Buffalo, I just didn't see the move from 3.5 on. It was a good 3.5 for me, and I don't really make lines and power rankings and all that.
Okay.
But I was just concerned about that game. I saw the scenario of the middle of the game where Miami pulled back and got even, and that's what I saw possibly for the whole game. So even though it was a highly mathematically advantaged play, I was leery of being on it. In fact, I wasn't on it because of that, but I wanted to hear their input on it.
No, go ahead.
Sorry, Brent. Oh, George, some of the listeners may want. Do you watch every game? Do you, for instance, were you at a book? Were you?
I've got Sunday tickets.
So you stay home and you watch every game. You watch what's okay.
Right.
And then you go through the box scores as well. I mean, or you just see enough when you from the visual aspect.
I match the teams up statistically.
Got it.
And I've got several other things I'll look at, particularly, like I said, I dumbed this season down. I wanted to stay in shape as much as anything else. So I dialed my analysis down extremely much until the last week, and then I took that week off and did what I normally do. But I had some very good research over in the summer. I've researched the mathematically advantaged lines approach for years on Dave Tooley's website. We did a series back in 2011 where we basically ran the question, can you win the Super Contest just playing stale lines? And I've continued to track that approach over the years. And what my takeaway is, you can't win the Super Contest. You can get close, tantalizingly close, because it has a good floor. But the upside on that strategy is just not enough to win the Super Contest. But it still has, the math is still very strong. So I'm gauging that, looking at that through the week, particularly this year, as I had a dumbed-down strategy, because I'm looking at only focusing on a few plays. So I look at a number of things like that and other things I researched during the offseason that complement that, and that helps me get on high percentage plays.
George, now will you bet back on individual games? Did you in the wild card weekend? And how about the divisional playoffs? Will you take a position?
I'm back at work and back trying to work out, since I haven't been working out since November.
Okay.
It's kind of hard for me in the playoffs because you only got 4 games, and a large part of what I do is the cut down from 13 to 16 to 5 games. You take away that selectivity, and that's a big deal for a big part of what I do. So I'm always reminded when I do bet on the division and the wild card rounds how much of an advantage that is. Okay. But this year, between trying to figure out whether I could do the media that I've done, and like I say, working and working out, I just haven't sat down and applied that same rigorous approach to those 4 games each week, because I've been on the clock for 17 weeks.
Right.
And I'm finally off. So, yeah, as a touter, it would be great. I would be on here saying these are great games. You know, it's a great time of year to bet, and it's a great time to get my picks. But I'm not a tout, so I don't have to do that.
Brent, I'll tell you what, I love this guest. First of all, 2 things. Number one, he gave the greatest pub for VSiN.com why you should subscribe. He went back and listened in Week 17, so a lot of people can do that retroactively. And number 2, the other point that he made that I really like is he kind of tunes everything else out. He doesn't want to get paralysis by overanalysis. Yep. And I want you and Vinny to heed that. That's why I don't listen to you guys that often.
Touche.
I take the bets. You make the bets.
Oh, that's great, George King. Congratulations again, and thanks so much for sharing some of those great moments with us. We love hearing the stories, and I second what Amal said. I'm always, when a big lottery goes down, I'm always happy. Yeah. When somebody scores, it's like, I could use that money for doing some good things, and I know you will. So thanks, George, and congratulations.
Well, thank you very much. Pleasure being here.
Okay.
Well done.
George King, he won the gold, and he cashed a couple of tickets also in the Classic, a big winner this year over at the Westgate Super Contest. We're going to take a break.
If you didn't catch VSiN last week, here's some of what you missed.
So you're basically saying 2 games carried to the point where, here it is, a little over 60% of the entire money that would be bet on a Sunday is bet on a Saturday with 2 anchor games. That shows you what people think of college football.
And imagine, Jimmy, if and when, because it's going to happen at some point.
8
I just don't
teams.
know when it goes to 7 games. 8 teams with 7 games, right? I mean, I'm not saying I don't know if it'll ever surpass the Super Bowl because the Super Bowl is going to have more props and everything like that. But single game, I should say. But they'll equal the NFL playoffs or exceed the NFL playoffs.
Right, Harden was available at 7-1 during the morning show. And as I got out trying to get down on that bet, right? By the time it was done, and I got in at about 3.5 to 1 on that, he was 2 to 1 by the end of the day. Now last night, 44, 15, and 10. Rockets win again, 135 to 134 in overtime against the Warriors.
Game of the year?
I would say so.
Yeah.
And Jeff Sherman, he tweeted this out after the game. He said Charles Barkley is right. He's the favorite now over at the Superbook here in town. Jeff Sherman has adjusted. He has now made James Harden plus 175 the favorite to win the MVP.
In about a span of a week.
So just 17% of the time does the spread actually factor in. That's during the regular season. During the playoffs, that 83% actually grows higher. And it's never higher than it is during Wild Card Weekend. Wild Card Weekend, the spread only matters roughly 11% of the time. 10 to 11% of the time. In other words, 9 out of 10 times. And this is obviously easier said than done. But if you ever wanted to distill Wild Card Weekend into one line, this is it. 9 out of 10 times in the NFL historically, if you can just figure out who's going to win the game, that's the team you bet. Don't think about the spread. Does that make any sense?
You have books in Nevada and you have one in New Mexico. How's the handle compare from state to state for you right now?
Well, I would compare the book in New Mexico to something like a Boyd Gaming or Stations property. You know, it's a huge local property. It's got a 250-room hotel as well with some decent casino players that stay there. But it's in that vicinity. You know, our limits are fairly low. We're taking a few $1,000s on NFL and $1,000 on the NBA. So our limits are probably lower than you would see. But we're obviously we're walking before we run, and we're extremely happy. And the ticket count is amazing.
Welcome back to the best of VSiN. Here are more of our favorite moments from the week.
Big bets coming in throughout the day and before kickoff, Paulie, on Clemson plus the 6, maybe first half bets, maybe money line. And I don't know what happened in that game other than Alabama eventually getting their asses kicked. But they were outgaining Clemson like 220-something to 80. Right away in that game. And Clemson had 2 3-and-outs. And then all of a sudden, like that, it was a totally different ball game. And it was over with. And Saban had no answers whatsoever.
No, he didn't. After the game, I did a lousy job. He did. They did whatever they wanted. But then again, there's that SEC defense for you, right? I mean, that's the first time under Saban that they allowed back-to-back 300-yard passing games, okay? Just carved them up. Did what he wanted. He picked them apart. Great call by Matt Humans, too, that no doubt we said about, not even that long ago, that Lawrence would be the number 1 pick in the draft if he came out. I mean, how good was that kid? I mean, the other thing was, best team ever. Best team all time. Everyone nailed it. They had the wrong team, though.
Yeah.
I mean, it was.
Clemson is one of the best teams of all time.
You go 15-0 and destroy. And then Sweeney said that after the game. He was tired of hearing about it. It's like, best of all time. Yeah, us. How about us? All this Alabama talk and several good tweets. Like, you pointed out the last couple of weeks, the what-if scenario. And it happened. No Alabama to win the title and no Tua to win the Heisman. Mm-hmm. Unbleeping believable. And then they shut him out in the second half. Complete domination. And again, they are number 1 at one thing. Media manipulation. Because when they play somebody, they get exposed, okay? Courtesy of Chris Felica, the Bear. They haven't played a true non-conference road game, Alabama, since 2011. They went to Penn State. 2012 through this year, they have played every year 4 true road games. So how'd they do against Georgia? How'd they look? Should have lost. What happened against Oklahoma? They moved the ball on them for 3 quarters and did what they wanted. You saw what happened last night. You saw what happened against Georgia last year. I mean, they didn't belong in the damn game last year. Didn't win their division. Looked horrible losing at Auburn. Somehow they get the benefit of the doubt over and over again. And that was just fantastic to watch and just see the beatdown. And then the pick 6 to start. Where's he throwing the ball?
I have no idea. He was terrible last night, by the way.
Oh, yeah.
He made a couple of nice passes. That's fine. But that pick 6, where was that ball going? Basically in a double coverage. Totally lost on that throw. The one later on in the game. That kid was so good for the first 9-10 games of the season, lost a Heisman Trophy, And I'm not going to say that he was completely exposed, but he was not good last night in the biggest moment when they absolutely had to have him. And he wasn't that great against Georgia either, by the way.
No, Hurts had to save the day.
Yeah,
absolutely. The Brett McMurphy tweet too, and I kind of talked myself into it. Shame on me. But, I said on air it opened too high, that prop minus 240 at the Westgate.
In an Alabama game, yes.
Yes, but then got down to 160 on the no, and then put me out of my misery 90 seconds in. Sorry, guys, I apologize for that one. But he came in with first 8 games, no interceptions, 152 attempts, passing attempts. This is from Brett McMurphy. Last 7 games, 6 picks and 172 passing attempts.
Yep. And Lawrence,
horrible throw. And how about Tua? Oh yeah. That's on me, guys. Well, no shit.
Yeah.
Of course it was. Of course it's on you. It's a horrible throw. Pick 6.
But here was where, again, it was like 3-1 in yards, Alabama. And they had the missed extra point, and he had the pick 6, and you're like, okay, man, this is going to be a really good game. I tweeted out, this feels like Texas USC all over again. And then end of the first half, when they're getting run out of the, they're getting just crushed. They tapped out at the end of the first half. They kind of just gave up, said, no, we're going to go to the locker room. Second half, they came out. And I totally disagreed with what Kirk Herbstreit said. They kept trying to establish the run after halftime, and there was no sense of urgency. And I'm like, guys, you're down by 15 points. You're getting mauled going into halftime. You have no answers for this Clemson team. You can't do anything offensively all of a sudden. And defensively, forget about it. They're doing whatever they want. And you're taking your time and running the football. And I just said, the body language here, this game's over with.
Yep.
It is done.
Oh.
They have no answers whatsoever. The play calling was atrocious for Alabama last night. The fake field goal, again, what's in the blood of SEC teams? The Georgia fake punt SEC title game, the fake field goal last night, and just eventually saying, Tua, get out of there.
Well,
Jalen, get into the game.
Yeah, I don't think the guy on the offensive line totally whiffed on a block. But in any event, and they tapped out in the fourth quarter. How about that drive to end the game? Clemson takes over at their own.
No pride last night.
10 minutes. They run the
Zero
clock out.
pride late in that game last night for Alabama.
They fooled me. They got me. They fooled me again because for 75% of the year they don't play anybody. So they kick everyone's ass, and then it's like, oh wow, they're so good, they're unbelievable. But when they finally play people and they see an elite quarterback, that's what happens. That's what happened.
And this is, right, without even thinking about it too much, this has to be Nick Saban's worst defense ever at Alabama. It has to be.
Oh, yeah.
But again, completely exposed here in the last 3 games. Georgia, awesome. Should have won the game in the SEC title game. Oklahoma, yeah, they're down 28-0 right away. After that, the defense was absolutely exhausted. And last night, again, it was a total. I never thought I was so bored with the game, and that was Nick Saban getting killed.
Yep. The tweets were fantastic, too. How about what Matt said on the coverage last night? The last time he was getting beat that bad was Miami Dolphins.
Yeah.
That was those tweets are unbelievable. The last time Bama lost by 16 or more, Saban beat him when he was at LSU. And the last time Saban lost the game by more than 14, December 17, 2006. The Bills beat the Dolphins by J.P. Losman. 3 touchdown passes.
Yep.
I can't believe it.
Clemson now 51, going into last night when they had that lead at the half. They were 51-0 last 10 seasons when having a 15-point lead at halftime or more.
You see that other tweet?
Most wins without a loss by any team over that span.
I'm sorry. Dabo, 7 wins as a dog in the postseason.
Sure.
What? He's amazing. And Jason Simbal had some fantastic tweets. Outscored opponents 662 to 197. And then the last 10 games with Lawrence, if you take out garbage time, it was 474 to 113. First undefeated champ, 15-0, spanked Bama. They won 13 games by 20 or more, and they beat Bama and Notre Dame by a combined 55. And they shut Bama out in the second half. Shut them out.
It's 31-16. Bama gets the ball at halftime, and you're thinking, okay, just put together one drive, make the adjustments at halftime, come out, have Tua go down the field throwing the football, and they can get right back into this thing. And they could not score a single point. How about the play calling? And I know Warren Sharp was all over this on Twitter last night as well, but the play calling by Bama on a different drive when they got it near the goal line, and it was jumbo up the middle, Tua on a run. Like they were waving the white flag. The signs were all there.
Yep. Bama averaged 48 points per game. They were shut out for the last 44 minutes.
Yep. Outscored. Clemson went on a 30-0 run last night.
Jesus.
And I got news for you, too. If they played 10 times, how many times is Alabama going to beat that team?
Yep.
With that cadet quarterback, they would have no answer for Ross. How good is he?
Oh,
they're going to be back. And that defensive line, maybe they win 3 out of 10?
Yep.
Is that an exact? Am I completely overreacting from last night? Clemson was clearly better. Clearly.
How about the game staying under the total of the opener? Yeah. Caesars sent out 61. How the hell did that stay under? 61, 60 and a half for the push on 60. Oh,
well, the in-play was immediately last night. It got as high as 84 from what I saw.
Did you do anything? I laid 20 and a half with Clemson.
I grabbed them.
They're not scoring.
I bet them a couple of times. I bet over right away on the in-play because I thought this is going to be in the 70s. Then I came back and I bet the under, so I kind of pushed there.
How high did it get? 81?
Right away it was 84. 84 right away.
Okay.
And then late it was down to 67.5, and it never got there. So going into the game last night, I had Bama on that plus 140 future ticket. But I came back because I like Clemson in the game, so I had them plus 6, and I had them to finish off a teaser as well. So it was just kind of a wash overall, to be honest.
Had everything. The first 8 minutes, we had everything. First score in the 90 seconds, that prop came in.
3 scores in the first 4.5 minutes.
Oh, yeah. Missed extra point. How does Alabama have the worst kicker in the country ever? How does that happen?
I know.
Can you go to a soccer field anywhere? Can you recruit somebody, Saban? Your kicking game stinks every year.
And until they finally got Tagovailoa as the quarterback, they always had a problem there as well. Basically a kicker-quarterback combination.
And this was an event. The event bettors were out in force. This lunatic, this cowboy bettor that Everson told us about yesterday from Covers.com.
Yeah.
I mean, the big bets all over town. It was nuts. William Hill, 200,000. Clemson money line, plus 190. William Hill, 220,000 on Alabama, minus 5. Westgate took 110,000 on Alabama. The cowboy bettor, Clemson, plus 120. Clemson plus 6, 120,000, minus 120. Then he took 6 again, minus 125. 125 to win 100. $100,000 on the money line. $100,000 first half. Someone else came in and bet 120,000 on the first half over. It's ridiculous.
I think the guy came back actually and tried to.
Clemson second half, same guy?
Yeah, here's the deal.
Yeah.
This is from Scott over at the Mirage. Mississippi books saved the day. Apparently plenty of Alabama money at those shops. And Better, who was all over Clemson, the 445,000 total pregame, came in at halftime trying to hit the middle for 240,000.
Oh, he came back with Bama.
He did, trying to hit the middle.
Okay, thank you.
So he lost that 240 then. Also put 100,000 on the Kings in the NHL. Jesus.
Wow. He's something.
Scott finished it off by saying crazy night, but we actually juiced out a small profit for the day. Tons of huge bets coming in on, as you just said. But a lot of it was on Clemson, though, too.
And Fitz was good last night on the broadcast with Matt and Kenny and the guys about the in-play was just fantastic. But it's obviously slowed down in the second half when the thing got out of hand. Jeez.
I thought Alabama was going to win a close game. 35, 31-ish, something like that. And at 16-14, you're like, okay, this is going according to plan, kind of. And then after that, it was lights out. The party's over.
Yep. Yeah, maybe you want to play somebody non-conference. That could help. Stop playing Louisville and these teams where you're laying 26. You're playing Duke to start the year next year. You're laying 26. At least that's what Charlie M makes it.
At least, Clemson, they have done this with teams where they go with the home and home. They've done it with Georgia recently.
Yeah, they
have
A&M
another one with
home.
Georgia.
Yeah,
A&M right now.
Yeah,
They're not afraid. Auburn.
Yep.
There you go.
They go to Notre Dame in 2020, I believe. So next year, it's at NC State, at Syracuse, A&M at home in the non-conference, at South Carolina as well, too. So Charlie M, make a win total for next year.
Yeah.
Get up on that.
Here's one, too. I want to see adjusted Heisman Trophy odds now. Remember last week when we talked to him about that, he made Tua and Lawrence each 350, I believe, next year. And I said, can you bump Lawrence up? Make him like 8-1, huh? For the sake of this. He's going to be the favorite now.
Well, one team appeared battle-tested, and the other one didn't. I mean, you go to A&M in that hostile environment, you play some tough games, and the other one, it's just this. They won't do it because that's how they've built this. They have great players, but again, with this, we're not going to play road games, and we do all this neutral site stuff.
I mean, here's what I found so just astonishing last night. Year after year after year, and yet Clemson has players, clearly, awesome players. But Bama has the best recruiting class, or top 2, top 3, every single year. He's done it now for pretty much a decade. When you have that much talent, that many players, how did you get completely blown out last night? How was it a total mismatch, by the way?
It's happened.
And it was a game for like a quarter, and that was it.
Trevor Knight did it. Time to prepare, right? Saban, month to prepare. What happened? Ohio State, third-string quarterback, month to prepare. Undressed by Meyer. What, they have 500 yards of offense? Do whatever they want?
I think they had 600.
I think, okay, you might be right. That's, we've seen it many times, and here it ends. They just picked them apart. Guys wide open. Secondary stinks. Deep shots, just like Oklahoma, just like Georgia. You know? See, LSU's never had a good quarterback in my lifetime. So that they always look great against LSU, but LSU can never throw the ball on them.
Right.
So it's like, wow, they beat LSU. What LSU? They match up beautifully against LSU because the quarterback play stinks.
I mean,
so once you see elite quarterbacks, this is what happens.
Yeah,
Several people tweeted, and you're right, but I've also been saying this for 20 years.
If you didn't catch VSiN last week, here's some of what you missed.
But you look at these games, they're always tight, they're tough, team falls behind. Look, when there is something to be said for when a team's season is on the line. We saw it last year with the Tennessee Titans. They were getting smoked early by Kansas City. People already had Kansas City making plans for the next week. They don't even win the game. And so I think you have to look at when a team's back is against the wall, they're going to compete at a level. And these teams are so close together. There's no real standout. We talk about the Saints and how good they are, and that's fair. But the reality is, all these teams today, I mean, it's going to come down to one possession, one turnover, one missed kick.
Joseph out with the Broncos.
Ah!
What?
You just took a wrecking ball to my team.
Oh, stop. Jason Simbal recapping season win totals. Hey, John sent me the text. Biggest winners for the book. Vikings going under, Seahawks going over, Chiefs going over, Giants going under. Biggest losers, Chargers going over, Bears going over, Rams over, Panthers going under. Good breakdown there.
Up next, another coach has been fired.
I should have texted me. Nagy, call somebody.
Seven of the 12 playoff teams have quarterbacks on rookie deals. We don't often think about that. The mainstream media doesn't pound this enough. That is a huge team-building edge, as Warren points out. So here are the NFL playoff seeds, AFC and NFC, the ones with the asterisks that you see at VSiN.com and Fubo TV. KC, Houston, Baltimore in the AFC, the Rams, Chicago, and Dallas, and also Philly in the NFC, although, of course, that's Carson Wentz. All of those teams have quarterbacks on rookie deals.
I think we're seeing, and I've talked about this before, probably talked about it with you guys, a lot of teams are going to make a lot of mistakes chasing the next Sean McVay. Sean McVay was a once-in-a-generation type hire. They hit a grand slam there. Just because Cliff Kingsbury is a young guy and he knows offense doesn't mean he can come in and be a head coach. Again, he was an alum at Texas Tech and a legend there, and they shoot him off. So I can't wrap my head around him all of a sudden being like the Jets head coach. What sense does that make to anybody?
Welcome back to the best of VSiN. Here are more of our favorite moments from the week. DraftKings Sports Betting National Championship $10,000 buy-in starts Friday in New Jersey. You have to make all your wagers on the app, on the DraftKings app from within New Jersey state borders. Listen to some of these guys who are going in. Phil Hellmuth, David Miller, Anthony Curtis, Frank Betty, Kenny White, Randy McKay. Oh, yes, Gil Alexander. Mr. Alexander, how are you, my friend, as you get ready? Or are you already in New Jersey?
I'm already in New Jersey, Brent. I'm already here. Already. One point of contention, may I say something first? This is the first time you and I have talked. Brent, I received a phone call from your producer to be on this show today from a Jorge Mondaca. I at one time had a producer by that same name who told me he was leaving the country and therefore was not on my show anymore. Is that the same guy? Have I been duped?
He's a relative.
Oh, okay. All right. Just checking. Just curious.
Jorge, that's all the cover I'm going to offer you. You know what I'm saying?
You're too kind.
Okay.
You know what? You know what I love about Gil already? The Chargers didn't stay on the East Coast. Gil went early. He's not waiting for the week. He's getting there early.
Say, Gil, by the way, where'd you finish in the Super Contest at the Westgate? You were in the top 10, weren't you?
I finished in 742nd place, Brent.
You
and
were
I'm
way up
curious
there.
where my check is.
Wow.
Yeah. Weren't you in 56th or something like that? What a year you had. Congratulations.
Yeah. How about, did you play the gold this year?
I did. Let's not talk about that.
Okay.
Wow.
All right, so now here you go. Now, this is a chance, though. This is a chance to win the $1 million. I want to go over, you tell me, what are the rules of engagement? We know it's a $10,000 buy-in. We know it starts Friday. You're going to be playing Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. Tell me what the rules of engagement are for this competition.
The rules are, $10,000 buy-in, $5,000 bankroll. You get to keep. So let's just say, let's say you don't win it. Let's say you just make some money. You get to keep whatever you make in your bankroll. But it's a $1,000 minimum Friday and Saturday, betting on anything the DraftKings app has to offer on any sport. And then Sunday, that shifts to a $2,000 minimum, which you have to bet, in other words, strictly on the National Football League. And it ends once the second game kicks off on Sunday. I think the background is interesting, Brent, in that a lot of people in that esteemed list of names that you just read, which I was sort of getting the impression you were trying to tell me I've got no shot at this, but I was impressed by that list. I know that Phil Hellmuth is saying that he's got an advantage. He feels he does. I think a lot of smart people, those people on that list, for instance, figured out sort of independently very late in the game because, we've been talking about it at VSiN. I know you have with Johnny Avello here of late, but it wasn't super publicized early on. And I think a lot of people independently came to the same conclusion, oh, wow, this is an opportunity because there's going to be, based on the guaranteed prize pool, there's probably going to be an overlay here. And sports bettors specifically looked at it as something that wasn't going to involve necessarily a whole bunch of sports bettors. It was going to be a lot of fantasy guys and otherwise. And that's usually something that sports bettors lick their chops on. So everybody thought they were the most clever guy in the room, and then we sort of all laughed together about a week ago, like, oh, everybody's going.
Yeah.
Not everybody, but a bunch of smart people.
Honestly, I was thinking I just can't get out because it's such a late date. But the one thing that I did think about Friday, Saturday, when you didn't have to bet the National Football League, I said, I would be paying very close attention to college basketball along with the NBA. And I think you've got to have a bankroll going into Sunday and those two NFL games where even though you can bet totals and you can bet in-game and whatever they offer on the NFL at DraftKings, but I'm thinking that you need to build that bankroll on Friday night and Saturday to have a little leeway to play with. Do you agree or disagree with that?
Oh, there's no question. There's no question. I think if you're trying to win, if your goal is to win, and everybody's certainly prior to this is to win this, that's the only way to get there. And I think that's the one thing that sort of everybody would agree on. I think what will be very interesting retrospectively after this is done, no matter who wins,
right?
It'll be very interesting just to see what the road to victory is for the person that does get there. Because I think you'll inevitably have a good percentage of people who will just simply try to make one big bet, then try to roll it over to another big bet, and they'll try to just get hot and do it that way. And that's not how the professional bettors who are traveling from different parts are going to do it. That bunch of bettors primarily is going to, and I'm speculating here, but I think I'm on solid ground in saying that's the group of bettors that's going to look at some of the more non-traditional bets, if you will.
Right.
And really smart bettors are very good at sort of isolating where the opportunity is. And I think that'll be their strategy by and large.
Good point, Gil. The other part about this is you actually don't have to participate. As Johnny indicated yesterday, you don't have to bet on Friday. So I don't know if some folks will take a wait-and-see approach because I think they're going to publish the standings as well. Remember that you have to bet Saturday, you have to bet Sunday. But you know, so
well, my take on that
is I'm not saying that's a good strategy, but
I think you have to look at every opportunity.
Oh, absolutely.
Whether or not you make a bet, they're still offering you an opportunity.
Yes,
and you may see it. I would say NBA would be active, and the National Hockey League would be active. I mean, let's take a look at these overs that are scoring in the NHL. Friday, you're going to get a look at these games. I find it fascinating because I think it's complex here. I think it's a little bit different. Do you agree with that, Gil?
I would agree, and I'll say this much: I think it's called the sports betting national champion.
Right.
I think that if you take that literally, you're probably going down the wrong path in terms of strategy. Yeah. I think you have to view it as a game more than you do an actual handicapping contest.
Yeah.
And I think therein lies the sort of key to it all.
I totally agree with you that it is a game, and you're involved with some good gamers in this situation.
That's right.
And you can approach things entirely different, right?
Well, yeah, and the other – I'm sorry, Gil, go ahead.
No, go ahead, Vinny. I'm sorry.
And the other part of it is, so you've got limit play. How you structure your wages is going to be dependent on what the limits are in terms of the offerings. Not every offering has the exact same limit.
Yeah, they'll take higher.
It's another
limits on the
strategy.
NFL.
No, exactly. So that's an interesting dynamic in it also.
And then
I think that's a great point about limits for sure, because I think there's a lot of players that will get perhaps the best laid plans will go by the wayside because of the limit part of it as well.
Yeah.
You've got to really mind your P's and Q's on it.
Jorge.
Hey, Gil, this is Jorge. As a longtime listener of Numbers Game, I know that you talk about all the sports. You talk about tennis.
It's a different
you talk
Jorge.
about NASCAR. You talk about basketball, football, hockey, everything. So how are you approaching this weekend? Are you just going to focus on a few sports, or are you going to focus on
Hey, wait
all
a minute,
the sports?
Jorge. You told me not to ask him about any kind of and then you come right in with the strategy. What the hell's going on here?
Obviously, it's the same Jorge.
Wait a minute. Are you the star of this deal? What is this thing? Is Jorge's guys in the desert? What's up around here today? Come on. Go ahead, Gil. I just had to have a little fun with the first cousin of your former producer.
He really, really sounds familiar. He really sounds like my Jorge. Cousin of Jorge, I will answer you by saying this. Listen, I think every sport is in play. I think it's, again, what Brent was saying earlier, which is that you have to look for every opportunity. I do believe, I'll just give you a story. James Salinas, who's the friend of VSiN, who won the Super Contest, who finished in third place, who finished in 26th place 2 years later. So just an amazing run and undeniably a great, if not the greatest of all time in terms of contest players. James texted me about a week and a half ago, just randomly. He was like, "Hey, Gil, you heard about this DraftKings contest? Like, it really sounds interesting." And immediately when I heard it was Salinas, I shot him back a text and I said, "Yeah, you don't want to play this. This is a whole scam. You don't want to play this at all. I hear you got to clear it with New Jersey Gaming." So that was the first thing, was how do I eliminate any competition? That was the first thing. Anyway, I've made nice with James, and James is going to play as well. But his, just to let you know, his strategy, as he has been very open with in terms of the Super Contest, is he watches games intently. So he's going to Atlantic City. He's going to have all the screens in front of him. He's going to be watching every possible opportunity live in front of him. Then I think there's some guys who aren't going to watch anything. They're just going to do it their own way. We have some ideas. I'm with a partner. We have ideas of how we want to do it. And it will involve multiple sports. But again, it won't be the traditional bets that the average bettor will think to make. And we have, again, it's about gaming the game, if you will. So that's my coy way of answering the question. More game than handicapping. And I think you have to treat it, I'll even offer this much, I think you have to treat it as one game for Friday and Saturday and another game for Sunday.
All right. Now, of course, the group gathering is up in Jersey City, where DraftKings has a warehouse and going to have actually a party over the weekend. You're in Atlantic City. Is that where you will? Is that where you will do your betting on the app, or will you go to Jersey City, Gil?
Yeah, I'm going to Jersey City on Friday. I do a weekly video with Jay Rood, our friend, Vice President of Racing Sports at MGM Resorts International. So we're doing it from Borgata this week. And really the only reason I'm in is because the producer of that show, who is my partner, he was the guy who said, hey, we're in New Jersey the same week as this thing.
Sure.
So just on a lark, we decided we're sticking around. And so we're going to Jersey City up on Friday. We're going to be in the middle of the action. You don't have to be in Jersey City, though, as I'm sure Johnny Avello has said.
Right.
You can fund it here elsewhere, as long as you're in the confines of Jersey.
New Jersey.
In the confines. Here come the New Yorkers.
That's right.
All right, my friend. Good luck, okay? Come back with a
Thank you,
W
sir.
for us, all right?
If you didn't catch VSiN last week, here's some of what you missed.
14.5-point spread. Matt Humans, too. Give him credit.
Did he call this one?
Oh, yeah. He was all over this one. New Mexico first half and the Lobos for the game. He was all in. Didn't think he was going to be a 30-point game. I'm not sure he thought that. Regardless, though, was on the Lobos. It was a great call for him. And if you look at this, too, I think what's interesting, because part of the conversation on Twitter yesterday is now what happens to Nevada in terms of seeding, right? Because this is, by all counts, a bad loss. Mountain West is not a good conference. It's very down. And, yes, granted, if this is their one loss, but if they don't win the conference tournament, who knows what happens? They don't have respect for the teams, especially on the West Coast. It's been a bad year for the West Coast, and this does them no favors.
How about tell the story when you were young and stupid in college? Notre Dame, Alabama.
Oh, that one?
Yeah.
A bookie had to show up at my house. That was the end of the story. After a visit to a car dealership. Yeah, I got suckered in on the 9.5 or whatever it was. I think I bought it to 10, thinking I was a genius. Minus 130, plus 10.
Yeah, like you can't lose, right? You're fired.
Wood, 13 grand to win 10. The biggest bet for, I'm out of college. That's more money than I had. I pulled it all together on credit, and then just halftime, I was upstairs eating room service. Like, God, kill me. It was over. It was 28 nothing, I think, or something.
So what's the end of the story? All of a sudden you're like, there's
so
a knockout.
I had a 91 original year Acura NSX, like the from the Pulp Fiction car, that thing. Had to go to drive it straight to the dealership. The guy was like, I'll give you 15 grand for it. And I was like, all right. From him to the bookie, said, all right, I'm not going to do this for a while. But yeah, that was the low point of I said there's got to be a better way.
So just 17% of the time does the spread actually factor in. That's during the regular season. During the playoffs, that 83% actually grows higher. And it's never higher than it is during wild card weekend. Wild card weekend, the spread only matters roughly 11% of the time. 10 to 11% of the time. In other words, 9 out of 10 times. And this is obviously easier said than done. But if you ever wanted to distill wild card weekend into one line, this is it. 9 out of 10 times in the NFL historically, if you can just figure out who's going to win the game, that's the team you bet. Don't think about the spread. Does that make any sense?
Welcome back to the best of VSiN. Here are more of our favorite moments from the week.
We continue with Bob Dancer. Follow the money, bobdancer.com. And the classes start today at the South Point. Here it is. Take it away. I'm excited. We always say we're going to get to it. We don't. Share the Jeopardy story. And your tease last week was you were supposed to work out a deal with the guy when you're on the show, and the guy reneged.
Yeah, well, let's get to that later if we have time, because the story itself takes a while. I had wanted to be on Jeopardy forever. I had practiced. I had read all the books. Memorized trivia books, history books. I knew all the academy, just worked and worked and worked. I still had to take the test twice. So they give the test every year. But the second time I passed, partly because they kept the same question from year to year, which was convenient. And I didn't know that. But so I started telling 400 of my closest friends that I was on Jeopardy, and if they watched on Friday night the 3rd at 7 o'clock, they would see me. which was an accomplishment because I only had 20 friends. And there was no Facebook, no Twitter, no computers. So everything was word of mouth and telephone and letters and stuff. But I was a one-trick pony. Everybody, when they met me, within the first 10 seconds, oh, did you know that I was on Jeopardy? And let me tell you about what Alex Trebek is really like, and blah, blah, blah. And so I was just unbearably obnoxious and probably would have been riding that pony still had it not been for a guy named Paul Rodriguez. Now, I know he shares the first name with you, Paul, but please forgive him for that. At the time, I was a database administrator at a Fortune 500 company in the Los Angeles area, and Paul worked in the same department as a computer programmer. So we were buddies outside, where we would both go to country western dances at night. We were both single at the time, and basically I wanted to be Paul. I was much taller. He was like 5'6", but muscular and slender, and the girls loved him. He was from, his parents were from Puerto Rico. He was really proud of his heritage, and he had a great sense of humor about it. He would go up to this beautiful blonde and said, you know, how lovely she was, and said, oh, by the way, do you have a little Puerto Rican in you? And she would always say, no. And he said, would you like a little Puerto Rican in you? And so, old joke, but it worked, and he got slapped, and it was great. So then I got on Jeopardy, and I started telling people that. So now, instead of all the girls wanting to talk to Paul, they came over to listen to my stories about Jeopardy. Now, this really upset Paul's idea of what the balance of power should be. He got really, really irritated. Finally, he couldn't take it anymore, and he said, it can't be that big of a deal to get on Jeopardy. I bet I could get on Jeopardy. And so this is kind of music to my ears. I have always been a gambling man. So I said, you know, would you like to make a little wager? And so we hemmed and hawed back and forth. We ended up $250 bet, which was big enough for him, and that was fine.
Pussy.
And, well, I couldn't lose because, I mean, Paul was smart, but like street smart. In college, he basically majored in getting laid. There was no way that he was going to pass a Jeopardy test. So I was even so confident that I was giving him some hints. Like, you know, I casually mentioned that they gave the same test, you know, from last year. And so I lent him all these books. Like I said, you memorize this almanac, that'd be a good idea. You know, and of course, you know, who can memorize an almanac? So all that was fine. And then finally he went to take the test. He said he was, they give the test 2 times, morning and afternoon. So he was going to take the whole day off of work. He was only going to take the test in the afternoon, but he figured he would stay home and study in the morning. So now there's truly 100,000 different questions they can ask you in Jeopardy. And the idea that he was going to get the magic question in the morning by a little bit extra study is unlikely. So I told him this. I said, I think that's a really smart idea, Paul. So Paul went. So that night we got home, I went dancing, and he wasn't there. And I was figuring he was going to come with my $250. The next day at work, I said, I want my $250. And he said, well, not so fast. He said, I'm still alive. He goes, now they do accept more people than they actually get on. But he said, I was definitely made the finals. And if you want to settle now for paying me $245, I'll accept. Now, as far as I'm concerned, there's no way in hell I'm paying him $245. I said, although if you want to pay me $245, I'll consider it. Probably not consider it very hard. He said, okay, the bet's still alive. So now he stopped going dancing, and he stayed home and studied. Could not figure this out. Finally, he said, next Tuesday, they're taping the show. Do you want to be in the audience? And I'm going, yeah, I want to see this with my own eyes. So I have my $250 just in case. Still can't believe he did it. But I get over there, and he's in the group of contestants. So I figured, okay, I've lost. So he was still my buddy. I rooted for him. He didn't win. But after he signed up, After he signed all the papers, shook Alice Trebek's hand, we went out for a drink. And I said, all right, you got to tell me how you did it. He says, can't do that. You have to pay me another $250 if you want me to tell you how I did it. So I called him some names. And I said, I've already paid you $250. He says, thank you very much. But if you want me to tell you, you pay me now. Because if you wait till tomorrow, the price is going to go up to $500, and who knows what it is going to be after that. And couldn't wait. So I said, all right. I said, I don't have the money on me, but I'll give it to you tomorrow. How'd you do it? He said, well, it was easy. I took the test twice. I said, how did you take the test twice? They only give it once a year. He goes, yeah, they give it once a year, but they give it twice in the same day. So in the morning, I wore a Los Angeles Dodger Fernando Valenzuela shirt. And people can't tell the difference between Puerto Ricans and Mexicans anyway. And I wore my glasses, and I couldn't have passed the test. But I memorized all of the questions. And then for the 3 hours between things, I went to the library, looked everything up, came back in my suit and tie, had my contacts on. He goes, he told me that I'd recognize him both ways, which I would, because I've seen him a lot, but nobody else would recognize him as the same guy. And so, anyway, I called him some more names. He said, I'm always talking about gambling with an edge. Aren't I? Isn't he proud of me for, he wanted to know if I was proud of him for gambling that way. And anyway, I had some more names for him. I said, well, what if they changed the test? He goes, well, I would have lost $250. He said, but I already figured that I was going to get you for $500 if I passed. So I figured the odds were 2-1 in my favor. So anyway, he moved away 6 months later. I haven't seen him since. But that's my story, and I'm sticking to it.
Jesus. My God. Fantastic. What was your story where the guy reneged on the... I don't have time. Go. We have 30 seconds. Can you fit it in?
Yeah. On Final Jeopardy, we had a deal beforehand. We said in the hallway that if we're in first and second place, and if the guy in second place bet the farm, the guy in first place would bet the right amount so that they would tie, and you both get the money, come back the next day. I was in second place, bet the farm. We both got it right, but he bet, so he ended up $100 ahead of me. He decided I got a Lazy Boy recliner and Lee press on nails or whatever it was, but didn't get the money.
Thanks for coming in. Classes start today. Bob Dancer.
If you didn't catch VSiN last week, here's some of what you missed.
You love Clemson to win flat out here tonight. Tell our audience about that.
I do, Brent. This one reminds me like your old colleague at CBS, the late great Chick Anderson at the 1978 affirmed Alidar Belmont, and he said, we're going to test these two to the wire. Well, I think that's what we're going to get here tonight, and I think it's going to look a lot like the games 3 and 2 years ago when Deshaun Watson was there. I don't think it's going to look like last year's game because Kelly Bryant was overmatched. There's some things Bryant did well at quarterback for Clemson, and he had some moxie, get out of the pocket. He was not a confident downfield thrower. Nick Saban realized that, and Bryant was a negative in that game. He couldn't do anything, and Saban realized it, and that was not a real pretty game to watch. It's completely different this year with Lawrence, and I think this kid is the bomb, and I think he's Watson-like, and in 2 years, like I joked over the weekend, I do a show in Denver, I said he'll be the first choice in the NFL draft in 2021.
I kind of want to bet Virginia.
Oh, will you stop it?
I kind of
Shut
do.
his mic off. Shut his mic off. Just became amateur hour. Come on.
I told you last year.
We got a great show. Don't make a comment like that. That's ridiculous.
Paul, if you don't think this team has come out this year.
Oh, here we go.
No. Just look at their scores this year. If you don't think this team is on a mission and pissed off about what happened as the only one seed to ever lose.
Oh, sure, yeah.
They are beating teams by 35 points.
They did the same thing last year. They ran right through the conference.
Not like this.
They ran right through the conference.
Not like this.
Oh, stop.
Paul, they were not like this. And by the way, I got news for you. They're way better offensively this year.
Yeah, well, okay, sure. We'll see.
I'm telling you, they are.
They do it every year. Oh, look at this. Virginia, great seed. Go down early.
Give me 20 to 1.
Doesn't
20. Give me 25 to 1.
I'm not giving you anything. Doesn't translate.
You're scared, huh?
No, I'm not scared. I'm not.
Sounds like
doesn't translate in March when you play that type of Mickey Mouse offense. You look up that half court. It's 50, 52, 50, and
that was their wake-up call.
Oh, okay.
That was the biggest wake-up call maybe ever in college basketball.
It's the exact. You know what? The exact opposite's going to happen about what you said. They're going to freak out because they're going to hear about it nonstop. Hey, you lost to a 16. There'll be so much pressure on them. They're going to be tight and they're going to lose again.
Nope,
like they
disagree.
always do.
It's going to be like this is going to be like Auburn losing to Central Florida last year. They've heard about it for an entire year. Came back. I know they were 7-5. That's not what I'm talking about. Auburn. Their bowl game. It was a mission to go up there and piss pound Purdue, and they did. And I think Virginia is going to be absolutely scary come March.
Welcome back to the best of VSiN. Here are more of our favorite moments from the week. Vinny, it's a pleasure to be joined here in our first segment by Steve Karp, the editor of Gaming Today. And, of course, I always look forward to Tuesday or Wednesday morning whenever I pick it up, the fresh copy. And there's our editor. And he tees up this week the state of New York where they play the waiting game. Steve, I'm guessing that they will screw it up for the next half dozen years.
Well, Vinny and I are living proof of that. Having grown up in Brooklyn, we know the power of those in Albany. If anyone can screw it up, Brent, it's those guys and gals.
As we refer to them, those people upstate.
Yes.
But, yes, Brent, it's, well, first of all, welcome into the studio, buddy. We always have you in here every Wednesday, Steve. And, politics, obviously, are necessary. They're part of our lives and everything. But you would think, Brent, that there would be an accelerated process by now in the state of New York. And obviously, and the reason I say that is given the fact that so many adjacent states, obviously New Jersey, West Virginia is close by, Delaware, and let's not forget Rhode Island and Pennsylvania and Rhode Island.
And then yesterday, Monday, Connecticut announced that they have legislation in place to bring sports betting to that state.
Yeah.
So you're going to have Connecticut, Pennsylvania, New Jersey, Rhode Island, Delaware, and here's little old New York, without betting. And let's remember something here. MGM is ready to make a major, major investment with their purchase of Yonkers Raceway.
That's right.
Where they're going to have a lot of jobs created for a lot of people in what has been a depressed facility for many years. Ben, you know this.
Been to Yonkers many times, and of course they also had the slot concession out on Long Island in the Belmont Park area.
They do.
And my kid around about upstate. What I mean is the legislators out there. We have so many good listeners. One of our VSiN fans of the year, Mr. Palmieri, lives up in the Buffalo area. We have and they're waiting for it. They want. And, Brent, I remember when the lottery came into it being, Stephen, 76, I believe it was, and it took so long then, and it was a cumbersome process. Listen, it's tried, it's true, it's proven, it's time, it's mainstay. And again, the adjacent states having it, you got people that driving literally back and forth across the bridge, the GW Bridge and taking the tunnels. And going,
make their bets on their phones, and they turn around and come home.
Yeah,
they don't mind paying the toll.
No,
they don't care.
No, just more vig.
Brent, it's one more vig. It's insane that New York State wasn't on top of this when PASPA was, overturned by the Supreme Court. But then it reminded myself, and I wrote about this today, when the UFC tried to get into New York State.
Right.
And all the years of haggling and lobbying, Mark Ratner, my good friend from who used to work for the Nevada Athletic Commission and, of course, was hired by the Fertittas, how many trips did that guy make to Albany to try to convince these people, hey, this is a revenue stream for you. If you legislate it like you do boxing, you can make a lot of money because, as you know, MMA, Brent, it remains a very hot item. Well, think about what sports betting can do for the coffers of the state of New York and all the good that money can do.
You know, one of the other things I would hope that they take a page internal, take a lesson of what happened. Remember, OTB's, you know, New York OTB closed down. Now, listen, there's something I get. There are procedures in place and there's things that you have to follow. But at this point, and I think Steve brought up a terrific point, Brent, PASPA was it was the overturning of PASPA was a favorite. You had to be prepared. New Jersey was at the forefront of it. I have to give them credit. I give credit to the other states, again, the adjacent states, and of course, anybody else that's moved on it. Look, you know what? It's what the people want. It's what the people will accept, and it's jobs, more jobs.
That's the point. You know, this Yonkers project of MGM is going to create a lot of jobs for a lot of people who need to work year round. It won't be a seasonal thing. And I'm not talking just about a few people who are going to work in a sports book. I'm talking about people who there's going to be a hotel, there's going to be restaurants, shops. Sure. There's going to be a lot of things to help that economy in southern Westchester by doing this. And if the people in the state legislature in New York aren't smart enough to figure out this, then shame on them. They should be voted out of office. They really should, because people are going to bet. It's like Vinny said. People drive over to George Washington Bridge on a Sunday morning, make their bets on their phone app, go get a cup of coffee and some eggs at a diner, and they hightail it right back to the city in time for the opening kickoff of whatever games they're watching. And remember, you can watch everything now at home. You don't have to go to the stadium. You don't have to go out to the Meadowlands to watch a game anymore, or Philly. You can just sit at home. And now, how about Pennsylvania? Parks opened yesterday. Their sportsbook, Brent. The Eagles are playing New Orleans on Sunday. They're an 8-point dog. Can you imagine what the traffic's going to be like at that sportsbook Sunday morning?
Oh, you won't be able to get in.
It's going to be unbelievable. Yeah. Same at Sugar House, the other Philly area casino. And here's what I'm curious about. And Vinny, you could really speak to this. You know, all the money's going to come in on Philly. A few wise guys, at Parks will bet the Saints. But over at Mississippi, okay, where the Saints are going to get pounded, is the number going to come down?
Well, that's a great point you bring up.
It's a little bit of a dichotomy here.
I was just speaking with one of your writers, Dave Dye, who was good to see. He's doing a piece on this very thing. So what you're referring to, Steve, is a regional bias, and let's remember 30 years ago, even 25 years ago, there was a significant difference in the point spreads down here in Southern Nevada on the 49ers and the Raiders compared to Reno and Northern Nevada. You would see at easily 1 to 2.5 point fluctuations. I don't think we're going to see that here, and I'll tell you why. Folks are much more educated about our industry, and there are enough sophisticated bettors out there that once that line gets to a certain point, they won't allow, they'll buy it back. They'll bet it back. So, but to your point, if you look at a ticket count, there's no question about it that there will be regional bias, regional disparity in terms of ticket count, but there'll be buyback much quicker in this day and age than in years past what we saw. But it's an important question you ask, and Dave did a good job of covering
I just wonder if, if you're in Atlantic City or if you're in Philly and it's Sunday morning and your heart's telling you, I got to bet the Eagles because I want to take a stand against the team I love. But the number goes to 9 to 7 or whatever. Do you still take it, or do you
True fans.
Actually, it'll go up in Philly.
Yeah.
No, it'll go down.
It'll go down in Philly.
It'll go up in Mississippi.
True fans will bet their team no matter what. But there's enough sophisticated play out there to offset that money-wise. Again, ticket count will be much greater, but all it takes is a few bets to balance that out. Yeah.
Good Steve, question. You were one of the original journalists to cover the Vegas Golden Knights, and you have a fine book out on their first season. And for those here in Las Vegas, we have an enormous number of fans up in the Summerlin area, season ticket holders. You're going to be at the Barnes & Noble. When to sign copies of that book?
Saturday from noon to 3. If you're in the area, come on by. It's over by Whole Foods.
On Charleston, right?
On Charleston and at Fort Apache. And then the following Saturday, if you're coming out to the morning skate for the Penguins game on the 19th, we're having a big book signing from 10:30 a.m. to 12:30 p.m. So you could go to the morning skate, watch the guys, get ready for the Penguins, and then come buy the book. I'll sign it. If you already own the book, thank you for buying it. Bring it by. I'll be glad to sign it. And we got 2 others coming up. One in February at Sunset Station with our good friend Chuck Esposito, and then one in March at Red Rock Resort in my neck of the woods, thanks to Jason McCormick. So we'll be more on that. But the 2 big signings are this Saturday and next Saturday. And I'm glad to say the book did very well. Bill Foley gave it a ringing endorsement, the owner of the Golden Knights. And you can't ask for much more than that. And, it's just remarkable the way this team's playing, Brent.
It's unbelievable.
They've got key guys out. Colin Miller has missed, I think, now 9 or 10 games. All right? He's their second best defenseman after Nate Schmidt. They're finding ways to win without him. Max Pacioretty was hurt. They're winning, now he's back. Riley Smith is out.
Stastny.
They're still winning. Stastny was out for the longest period. But, it just shows you how good he is. I mean, I don't know if they're ever going to get whole. If they do, they might be back in the Stanley Cup Finals. And I know the odds are reflecting it because people have a lot of faith in George McPhee, the general manager, and Gerard Gallant, the coach, that they're going to do the right things come the trade deadline to make this team even better.
I'm amazed at this young man named Pirri, Pirri. They bring him back up.
Yes.
I guess Carrier, my wife told me, was injured.
He was sick. He had the flu.
So they bring Pirri back. He scores again. I mean, all he does is put the puck in the net.
He's got what they say in the trade is great mitts. He's got really good hands. And he's got really good hockey IQ. He's been around. He was a Ranger. He was with Florida. That's where Gallant
Played for Gallant in Florida, right?
Played for Gallant in Florida. I mean, this kid just is a scorer. The knock on him, Brent, the reason he hasn't stuck in the NHL is because he couldn't guard you or I. And I don't even think you could skate. I know I could skate, and I probably could have eluded him. He's gotten so much better defensively in the past year after playing in the AHL with the Knights farm team, the Chicago Wolves. Rocky Thompson, the coach there, did an amazing job of getting this kid thinking defense as well, by the same time not shortchanging him offensively.
Yep, Steve.
He's really good.
Mitch and Polly, our morning show, great job. They have been talking about the abundance of overs showing up in the first period with certain teams. The run on the overs in the National Hockey League, it's attracting a whole new wave of bettors who don't ordinarily bet the National Hockey League. Now, why is scoring up overall than that? What's going on within the league?
Well, a couple things. First of all, the goaltending is not as good this year as it's been. Yeah, I mean, you got the Flurries and guys like that and Vasilevskis and Bobrovskis. But most of the goaltending in the NHL, and I looked at the Rangers last night, playing their backup goalie, Georgiev, instead of a future Hall of Famer, Henrik Lundqvist. All right? That kind of tells you that the goaltending is overall not as good as it's been. The other thing is the rules are written such that the game is so much faster. It's kind of like football. The way football's officiated now, it kind of lends itself to offense rather than defense. So, more penalties are called, more power plays are being given to teams, and a lot of teams are decent. Now, Vegas, ironically, is kind of lousy with their power play. But again, that's because they're missing a key guy in Colin Miller, who plays the point on the first unit and is very good. But that's, I think, why we're seeing teams get off to fast starts. Plus, there's a lot of bad teams. Ottawa, Jersey,
Rangers.
The Rangers, Arizona, the Kings. So these teams are giving up goals because they're not very good defensively.
If you didn't catch VSiN last week, here's some of what you missed.
So you're basically saying 2 games carried to the point where here it is, a little over 60% of the entire money that would be bet on a Sunday is bet on a Saturday with 2 anchor games. That shows you what people think of college football.
And imagine, Jimmy, if and when, because it's going to happen at some point. I just don't know when it goes to 7 games. We're 8 teams with 7 games, right? I mean, I'm not saying, I don't know if it'll ever surpass the Super Bowl because the Super Bowl is going to have more props and everything like that. But single game, I should say. But they'll equal the NFL playoffs or exceed the NFL playoffs.
Right, Harden was available at 7-1 during the morning show. And as I got out trying to get down on that bet, right? By the time it was done, and I got in at about 3.5 to 1 on that, he was 2 to 1 by the end of the day. Now last night, 44, 15, and 10. Rockets win again, 135 to 134 in overtime against the Warriors.
Game of the year?
I would say so.
Yeah.
And Jeff Sherman, he tweeted this out after the game. He said Charles Barkley is right. He's the favorite now. Over at the Superbook here in town, Jeff Sherman has adjusted. He has now made James Harden plus 175 the favorite to win the MVP.
In about a span of a week.
So just 17% of the time does the spread actually factor in. That's during the regular season. During the playoffs, that 83% actually grows higher. And it's never higher than it is during Wild Card Weekend. Wild Card Weekend, the spread only matters roughly 11% of the time. 10 to 11% of the time. In other words, 9 out of 10 times. And this is obviously easier said than done. But if you ever wanted to distill Wild Card Weekend into one line, this is it. 9 out of 10 times in the NFL historically, if you can just figure out who's going to win the game, that's the team you bet. Don't think about the spread. Does that make any sense?
You have books in Nevada and you have one in New Mexico. How's the handle compare from state to state for you right now?
Well, I would compare the book in New Mexico to something like a Boyd Gaming or a Stations property. You know, it's a huge local property. It's got a 250-room hotel as well with some decent casino players that stay there. But it's in that vicinity. You know, our limits are fairly low. We're taking a few $1,000s on NFL and $1,000 on the NBA. So our limits are probably lower than you would see. But we're obviously we're walking before we run, and we're extremely happy. And the ticket count is amazing.
Welcome back to the best of VSiN. Here are more of our favorite moments from the week.
Talk a little NBA, shall we? Can we do that? Fantasy NBA Today podcast host Dan Besbris with us. Good morning, Dano.
Good morning, Gil. And Mateo, I would love to know the Emmy. Was it at least a classy film?
I'll let you know off air.
I've opened a can of worms. It was for writing, right? Right, Mateo?
Yeah, it was for producing.
For producing. Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, it was for producing. Well, let's get you an Emmy here, for God's sakes. Dano, the National Basketball Association, I don't know if you know this, near the halfway mark of the season, I should say. Just shy of that. Most teams right about 37 through 39 games played. And this has been, it certainly hasn't lacked for drama. Let's put it this way. Let's put it that way. And as people look at the futures market now in the NBA, I sort of want to, it is top heavy, obviously, with the Warriors, but it's been interesting. I was watching football with James Salinas, who won the Super Contest, then finished third place the next year, finished 26th. I was watching football with him on Sunday. He lives in Denver, and he was telling me he's so locked into football, right, that he knows nothing about basketball while football is happening. And he takes his son to a Nuggets game the other night, and his son informs him, Dad, we have the best team in the Western Conference. And he looks at his son and he goes, Stop lying to your father. It's not that. It's not polite. But that is, in fact, what the Nuggets are. While every other team is, filled with drama, Nuggets just kind of keep slogging away, 26-12 atop the West.
They do. It's and it's despite a lot of injuries as well. What can you say? That Nikola Jokic has been outstanding. They've proven to be way deeper than folks expected. I kept thinking that there would be a little skid coming, but they're finding a way, and a lot of it, and the Pacers are actually kind of a similar story on the other side, has been with a vastly improved defense in the modern NBA. Who would have thunk it?
Yeah, and the Nuggets, by the way, 30-1 to win it all. I should point out, Paul Millsap, Gary Harris, getting back here, long injury layoffs. Will Barton expected back as well. You're not biting on any futures on the Nuggets, though. Let's not get crazy.
No, I'm not. They've been a fun story. I love the regular season. I know people are like, what's the point? I'll just tune in for the playoffs. But this is the point, to see teams like the Nuggets that are powering along, that feel like they have something they need to prove and taking that next step. But no, they may be 26-12, and they may be a game ahead of the Warriors and a game and a half ahead of the Thunder. But come playoff time, there's going to be that sort of new learning curve for them, and they're probably going to get hit in the mouth. But still a great story to this point.
That's for sure. And of course, the game between the Rockets and the Warriors this past week, just an amazing performance from James Harden. One of many amazing performances. That one culminating, though, in a Harden 3 in overtime. First of all, a 3 to tie it in regulation, then a 3 in overtime to beat the Warriors with Draymond in front of him and Clay behind him. We've said it many times about the Warriors. They're so far into this championship run, 3 championships in the last 4 seasons, that it's obviously not going to be a motivational thing on a night-to-night basis. They're just not going to be able to bring it. But those are certainly games that they're up by 20 points, as they were in that game against the Rockets, that they just simply haven't lost in the past. Does that at all concern you at all? The fact that that's something we haven't seen from this bunch.
No, still doesn't. They're going through the motions, and you can just see it in their body language on a night-to-night basis. And it also feels like that they're taking individual games to just sort of make guys feel better about themselves. There's like the Clay game where they just sort of let Clay do stuff. And then there's the KD game where anytime Kevin Durant is feeling a little sensitive, they'll just let him run ISO for a half a quarter instead of their normal offense. And they've still got Boogie coming back in the next few weeks. So not panicked yet, although I will give you, Gil, that this is easily the most we can turn it on later Warriors we've seen to this point in their championship run. This is a very low energy team a lot of the time. And it actually, I know that we've talked about these revenge angles in the past. It's kind of bearing it out on that side of things where the Warriors just don't care. You know, that there have been a handful of games where they've actually lost to a team. And in the past, that's the kind of thing that would fire them up and make them want to just destroy an opponent. And this year, they'll just play hard for the first quarter and say, you know what, we showed that we can get 15 points out in front of this team, and then we'll just coast. And if we lose, outstanding. And if we win, even better. But at the end of it all, we can always flash another player's jersey number after we get called for a traveling violation.
as Steph Curry did, flashing up the 1-3 to say, hey, you let James Harden take 5 steps. Why don't you let me take 5 steps sometimes when I back up behind the arc? By the way, the Warriors 16-24 against the number this year, along with the Washington Wizards, the worst record against the number in the NBA. The Warriors will hemorrhage you some money. You got to be very careful on a night-to-night basis with them. The best team against the number in the NBA thus far this year, the San Antonio Spurs, who have had the most schizophrenic first part of the season. They're exactly at the halfway mark, by the way, of their season. 25-15-1 against the spread. How are you feeling about the Spurs as sort of a playoff team that could do some damage?
Well, the first half of that I'm on board with. They're a playoff team, but they can do some damage part I'm not sure I'm on board with. It is. We all sort of knew that at some point they'd get it figured out after a very slow start. The return of Derek White did help them substantially, just to have someone who can play point guard. That's not Patty Mills, who doesn't run an offense. He's a three-point shooter. But LaMarcus Aldridge is looking more settled in over the last couple of weeks. DeMar DeRozan, it seemed like they were actually kind of force-feeding him to start the year. But they're balanced, and they are playing great defense over the last roughly month when they've been on this hot run. Still a lot better at home than they are on the road, but don't let that record fool you. They've been a lot better on the road over the last couple of weeks as well. And they're crushing teams these days because of their defense. They're just, every year, Gil, it's a team where the guys are just in the right place defensively, having decent fundamentals on that end of the court. You don't need to block everybody's shot. You just need to stay between them and the hoop. And Spurs are going to be right in the thick of things. I don't know about the star power to sort of get over that hump because they still can't. Their key guys still can't shoot the three ball. They're a piece short of being a dangerous team in the playoffs. but they're going to make them, and they're going to be the Spurs, same as always.
Same as always, Spurs team that has won, if I'm not mistaken, 13 out of their last 16 now, San Antonio Spurs. So quite a run for Greg Popovich's club. I'm trying to make a case.
Hey, Gil, jumping in real quick,
Please.
You were talking about the Wizards being really terrible against the numbers.
Yes.
They've actually been better the last few games.
They have. John Wall done for the season. Do you think Bradley Beal gets moved?
I think they're feeling like they want to make a run at it now. That 8 seed in the Eastern Conference sure is juicy. They're 16-24, and they're 3 games out.
Everybody here in the studio thought we lost you on that question, Dan. We were so flabbergasted by that. Yeah. By the way, everybody, if you're playing the Wizards, why don't you double Bradley Beal and say to everybody else, let's see the rest of you do something? Like, why isn't that the strategy of every one of these games?
Just triple him.
Yeah. Do something, guys. I'm trying to make a case for some other team, right? I'm just trying to talk about the Oklahoma City Thunder for a second. Russell Westbrook, notoriously now in a shooting slump, and there was a stretch there of 12 games where he shot 37.8% from the field, 26% from behind the arc. It's an extended slump, but Thunder still won 8 of those 12 games, Dano. Still won 8 of them. Average net rating plus 5.6 during that stretch. Defense first team, and Westbrook's still effective even though he's not scoring. Does that make you look at a team like the Thunder and say, all right, maybe, like, I'm just looking for a team. I'm trying to get somebody excited about a team in the futures market where they have a legit shot at, if not winning it all, but advancing far enough in the playoffs where they can play around with their bet?
Yes, they are. And that was the team, actually, that most people said, hey, who's the other guy out there? That was the one that I looked at because just from sort of a big picture standpoint, this was always a team that went as Westbrook went. If he was good, they could win. If he was terrible, they could lose. But this offseason, they sort of went all in on other players being really good on the defensive end of the floor. So you know what? If our offense is just going to be stuck in whatever Westbrook is doing, we might as well stop the other guy. So Jeremy Grant as the starting power forward instead of Carmelo Anthony. That's a huge defensive upgrade. Nerlens Noel as the backup center. Big defensive upgrade. We still haven't seen Andre Robertson at any point this year, but he's a very good defensive player. I don't know if we ever will see him this year. And then obviously Paul George, who's, all world defensively. On top of everything else, first of all, that the defensive schemes that they've put together have worked. Having all of these guys that can stop other clubs has mitigated the Westbrook shooting slump. And then the fact that Paul George has been playing at an MVP level, that's been sort of a side bonus. His shooting percentage is up. He's taking people off the dribble. He looks like the Paul George that everybody thought maybe he might be one day. And it's awesome. And as a Laker fan, I am beyond sad at the entire operation. But the Thunder are good. They can beat teams, and when they lock in defensively, which tends to happen in the second half, I would recommend folks watch Thunder games. They make other teams look really bad offensively, and those teams, like the blogosphere for their opponents, goes crazy wondering why their offense stinks. It's because the Thunder are really good on defense.
Real good. Talking to Dan Besbris at Dan, BESBRIS. Then before I ask you about this 8-game slate tonight, see if you have any thoughts, any plays on this, I just wanted to ask you briefly. Tom Thibodeau went from defensive genius to the coach that we used to talk about with the Timberwolves, who would just play as starters a little too long, right? Like their average minutes logged was just way above the fray, to getting fired after crushing the Lakers the other night by 20 plus. What do you make of that?
This was something that they knew they needed to do, and I don't know if they were just looking for the moment to do it, and when it didn't show up, they were just like, what the hey, let's wait for a big win and then send him off with a better taste in his mouth. Tibbs, everything that he was doing in Minnesota was a mess, playing Taj Gibson giant minutes for a year and a half before they traded for Dario Saric, and those two guys are basically splitting time now. And then my boss over here at Hoop Ball suggested that maybe running new toy Rob Covington into the ground might be the thing that sort of the straw that broke the camel's back. And amazingly, that was it. Rob Covington, who was basically anchoring their defense after this trade, he has a bone bruise, and they played him 38, 40 minutes anyway, and now he's out for probably 2 to 4 weeks or something like that. And you wonder if maybe the ownership was like, all right, fine, you know what, we got rid of Jimmy Butler, we got you some new toys, and you broke them. This is why we can't have nice things. Time to go. I don't know how much changes with the roster right now. You know, you've got you got Derrick Rose, you've got Taj, you've got Luol Deng sitting over there doing something on the bench on a night-to-night basis. With Flip Saunders' kid taking over, maybe they modernize the offense a tiny bit, but the personnel sort of is who it is at this point. And so I don't know about any big changes on that front. But you could get a little coaching bump with guys that maybe will be pleased that he's gone. It's going to balance out, though, with all those old Bulls guys that he just kept collecting in Minnesota. And so it's a weird situation, to be sure.
If you didn't catch VSiN last week, here's some of what you missed.
But you look at these games, they're always tight, they're tough, team falls behind. Look, when there is something to be said for when a team's season is on the line. We saw it last year with the Tennessee Titans. They were getting smoked early by Kansas City. People already had Kansas City making plans for the next week. They don't even win the game. And so I think you have to look at when a team's back is against the wall, they're going to compete at a level. And these teams are so close together. There's no real standout. We talk about the Saints and how good they are, and that's fair. But the reality is, all these teams today, I mean, it's going to come down to one possession, one turnover, one missed kick.
Joseph out with the Broncos.
Ah!
What?
You just took a wrecking ball to my team.
Oh, stop. Jason Simbal recapping season win totals. Hey, John sent me the text. Biggest winners for the book. Vikings going under, Seahawks going over, Chiefs going over, Giants going under. Biggest losers, Chargers going over, Bears going over, Rams over, Panthers going under. Good breakdown there.
Up next, another coach has been fired.
I should have texted me. Nagy, call somebody.
Seven of the 12 playoff teams have quarterbacks on rookie deals. We don't often think about that. The mainstream media doesn't pound this enough. That is a huge team-building edge, as Warren points out. So here are the NFL playoff seeds, AFC and NFC, the ones with the asterisks that you see at VSiN.com and Fubo TV. KC, Houston, Baltimore in the AFC, the Rams, Chicago, and Dallas, and also Philly in the NFC, although, of course, that's Carson Wentz. All of those teams have quarterbacks on rookie deals.
I think we're seeing, and I've talked about this before, probably talked about it with you guys, a lot of teams are going to make a lot of mistakes chasing the next Sean McVay. Sean McVay was a once-in-a-generation type hire. They hit a grand slam there. Just because Cliff Kingsbury is a young guy and he knows offense doesn't mean he can come in and be a head coach. Again, he was an alum at Texas Tech and a legend there, and they shoot him off. So I can't wrap my head around him all of a sudden being like the Jets head coach. What sense does that make to anybody?
Welcome back to the best of VSiN. Here are more of our favorite moments from the week.
So now that college football is done, over with, we do have a little bit in terms of futures that we can get to because I know you already dabbled in some of the futures in college football.
I did.
We'll get to that in a second. But let's get to college basketball because, of course, now that college football is over with, a lot of people like to turn their attention a little bit to college hoops or the NBA, mostly, though, college hoops, which amazes me, too, by the way, that you won't bet on the NBA, but you'll bet on college hoops. But I guess smaller sample size, smaller schedule, games be more, you get more in terms of effort on a night-to-night basis. Let me ask you this general question, because I know you like to bet on college hoops. Generally, when you see this time of year, because in the first few months during college football, during the brunt of the NFL season, not a lot of money in terms of the public pool is in on some of these lines.
Sure.
Now you'll see more public money show up on a lot of these lines, which I think alters what you're seeing on the board from a day-to-day basis.
Yeah, that's probably true, especially on like a Saturday with a bigger slate of games, and rather than a Tuesday night. Although there's a nice slate tonight. I was just thinking last night as I was leaving the Westgate, watched the national championship game, kind of like, oh, okay, football's over. I can take a breath of fresh air relax a little, and realize I'm betting like 50 basketball games a week.
Yeah, I was going to say, and then you realize Duke's on the board, Maryland, Minnesota.
It never ends. It just keeps going. It's a grind, but it's fun, and it's something that I definitely focus on for the next 3 months is college basketball.
So let's talk about, before we get to the games tonight, because you're right, there's a fantastic schedule later tonight. Let's take a look at just the big picture here, because you were talking about how you were over at the Westgate, and I was going over some of their odds, and we have some of the odds from the South Point. We'll throw this up because this will go hand in hand in terms of, because the old adage, right, shop for the best price. You always want to get the best number, and you can if you look around, and these are just 2 casinos, so you really got to do your due diligence. But the futures board here at the South Point, Duke plus 150, Michigan is 5-1, Gonzaga's 8-1. You still have Nevada at 10-1, which we'll get to in a second. Michigan State at 10-1, Kansas at 12-1, UNC Virginia 15-1, as is Tennessee. I bring this up because you look at the future board for the Westgate, you have Duke plus 160, you have Gonzaga 8-1, Virginia 10-1, Michigan 10-1, North Carolina 12-1, as is Michigan State. Kentucky is 14, Tennessee's 15, and because of that loss at the pit, Nevada falls all the way to 30-1 in the futures board over at the Westgate. But the 2 things that stick out are, 1, the gap between Duke and then Gonzaga, because at least here at the South Point, you have Michigan in there as well, kind of up there at 5-1. But there's a gap between Duke and Gonzaga, plus 160 to 8-1, and the fact that the Wolfpack in Nevada drops all the way to 30-1 after 1 loss to New Mexico.
Yeah, my initial thought about Nevada dropping to 31 outside of I need to go bet that right after the show ends and drive down to the Westgate is that seems pretty drastic for losing what I deem a meaningless game in the grand picture, big scope of it all. 1 loss to New Mexico won't matter. But then you threw this back at me, which is, I think, a fair point, especially if Nevada hadn't gotten like that kind of hype before the season as a top 10 team. Losing a game, if they don't win the Mountain West Conference, are they going to get an automatic bid? There's probably some small percentage of the time, especially if they drop 1 or 2 more, where they have to win the conference tournament or they don't even get into the actual NCAA tournament. And so maybe that's why the Westgate dropped that number all the way from 10 to 30. I think they're still, probably the 9th or 10th best team in the country if I looked at my numbers. And 30-1 is a pretty big bargain, I think, as far as their opportunities or chances of making a run in the tournament. We saw them do it last year with like 6 players that were healthy, and they'll be in a better position. I don't think they're going to lose again in the Mountain West, but really they've had a ton of games prior to that New Mexico one where they've only come out maybe for the second half and turned it on. Very Golden State Warriors-esque, where they're flat, they're down at halftime and had to make a run. So they drop 1 or 2 more. Yeah, it'll be interesting.
And this is the thing that I think worries you about Nevada to that point about whether or not they'll make it, because out of all the places, and like New Mexico, like the Mountain West is a conference of very tough home courts, right? Like they're odd trips. Yeah. Laramie is a tough place to play at. New Mexico is a tough place to play at. Viejas back in the day when San Diego State was actually really good was a very tough place to play. But think about this. So Ken Pom ranks New Mexico 144th. Right? They still have trips to Fresno State, who's 63rd. That game against Utah State on the road is going to be very tough. That's near the end of the year on March 2nd. They're 47th in KP rankings, right? And then you look like a team like UNLV is not good, but UNLV did beat them on their home floor last year, and UNLV is a big rivalry spot for them too. So there's like 3 realistic spots, and then all the other ones where if you look past an opponent, that they could possibly drop another game. And then a second one, like that's a death knell for them. Because then, of course, I think you have to, if they take a second loss in conference, especially if they lose a home game for sure. But if they lose a second game, you have to make a real strong case that they would have to win the Mountain West Conference tournament.
Yeah, I think there's probably some, I'd have to look exactly, probably 25 to 30% chance, just straight numbers, projections, that they lose in Logan to Utah State. They only closed, I think, a 9.5, 10-point favorite at home.
KP's got them as a 59% chance to win that game.
Okay, so it's more like 41% that they lose, so even higher than I was projecting. Okay, so there you go. So, I mean, I think Utah State shot something like 20% from 3 and 33% overall in the game in Nevada just last week. That's the spot. If they lose that game on the road, I think they're okay, especially since Utah State's pretty good. It's not as bad of a loss as New Mexico. But after that, if they lose any other game, like you said, or if it's a home game, then it's going to be, Mountain West Conference tournament or die.
Yep, and that's the danger too, I think, right, of playing some of these. Like you said, Nevada 30-1. If they take a second loss per chance, right, and you jumped in at 31, you could be staring at a spot where you could get a better number.
40-1 or 51, yeah.
Exactly. So you look at some of these numbers, but it is interesting. After 1 loss, you have this skew. So again, you have to shop for the best number. 10-1 here, 30-1 over at the Westgate, and of course other shops that you can take a look at for Nevada. And then you were talking too before we started the show. Duke at plus 160 or thereabouts here to win the college basketball national title. Behind them, Gonzaga at 8-1. And to me, the simplistic view is Gonzaga on a neutral, without arguably their best player, handed them a loss. Now, granted, Duke came back in that game, and it was very tight down the stretch. They still won that game. It amazes me that Duke is as high as they are with that gap between them and Gonzaga.
I think you and I could go on and on about this, and just because it's very correlated to the NBA, and we both actually enjoy watching the NBA, but I don't pretend to be a scout when it comes to basketball.
Yeah.
But I watch enough that I feel like I probably know more than the average person. And it took me one half of basketball watching Duke against Kentucky to realize that these were, Zion Williamson and then obviously RJ Barrett. Yeah. They are probably going to go 1-2 in the NBA draft, and they are already NBA level players that would be, impactful in the NBA right now.
Yep.
And no one's really going to be able to stop them very well. And they were plus 450, plus 400 around town. So I went and bet Duke to win it all pretty sizably for me. And I'm riding the Duke train. They are better, and I rate them, I think, 4 points better than Gonzaga on a neutral court, despite the loss to Gonzaga. The reason Gonzaga has a shot, again, if they meet in the tournament, and maybe Tennessee's close, is they have the size to at least defend these NBA guys without just having to foul every time or give up layups and dunks. They can actually force Duke to hit threes, where I think they rank 240th in three-point percentage. They only shoot 32% from three. And so if they're cold, which they were against Gonzaga, that's going to be a chance to beat them, right? It's just in one game, the variance is super high, especially when it comes down to the three-point shot. There aren't many teams that can actually keep them from driving isolation. And you saw in the Gonzaga game, I think RJ Barrett went ISO 4 or 5 times to end the game. Gonzaga could not score. They were missing free throws. Duke had so many chances, and still inside the rim protection was phenomenal. And Duke, I think when they did kick it out, they missed 1-3. Reddish missed a 3. But it comes down to that. And I think Tennessee's maybe close to being able to do that defensively. But the team that actually is the most efficient offensively in the entire nation is actually Gonzaga.
Yep.
They 1.2 points per possession, which is a big jump, I think, from where second place is. So I have to say it's Gonzaga after Duke for sure. And then there's another tier, I think, after that for me. So the fact that Duke is ahead, I understand it. I think they're by far the best team talent-wise. And it's very Kentucky-esque, where they always kind of figure it out towards the end of the season to another level come conference tournament time, and then March. And if Duke does that, or heaven forbid they actually start making some three-pointers. Like Cam Reddish is supposed to be a shooter, and he's 32% three-point shooter. RJ Barrett, I think, is around 32 or 33. I think Jack White's the only guy shooting 40% for the team that plays significant minutes. So if they start shooting threes better, or they're just able to actually attack, and their scheming and chemistry improves, then they're going to be just super scary come tournament time. So I'm fine. I think if people are even betting plus 160, 150, I honestly think that's still a pretty good bet.
Yeah, right now, Gonzaga 1.23 point per possession. Behind them is Duke 1.198. So that's your offensive rating for both of those. And the thing I think that scares you about Duke, too, to lead to the fact that they're just such a heavy favorite at this point, is the fact that they're second in the nation in adjusted defensive efficiency. And that's a big part of it.
Yeah, like last year, I think they were 40th, and they just weren't good enough.
But to your point,
to zone.
I was going to say, they switched to zone. They figured it out. Coach K realized, I have length. Let's just sit in a 2-3 and then just mess with these guys and force them to shoot over the top. And it worked. Got them all the way as far as the Final Four, what they did last year.
Yep. No, it's definitely true. I am interested to see how they play, because Virginia is just such a weird matchup for so many teams. How they attack Virginia. They're big enough and scheme well enough defensively, or they're forced Duke to shoot a bunch of contested threes, which is what Duke doesn't want to be doing. So when they play, I think we'll learn a lot more about where Duke's at schematically, offensively, but great point about their defense. It's way better than it's been in the past. And if that keeps up, they force a ton of turnovers. I think their turnover rate's top 10 or 15 in the country, which, if other teams aren't able to score on you, then even if you are cold from three, or a team's, forcing you and they're not fouling. I don't think Gonzaga or Virginia are teams that foul very often, right? I mean, Notre Dame's up there as one of the teams that never fouls.
Yep.
That's going to go a long way in these games, too.
If you didn't catch VSiN last week, here's some of what you missed.
14.5-point spread. Matt Humans, too. Give him credit.
Did he call this one?
Oh, yeah. He was all over this one. New Mexico first half and the Lobos for the game. He was all in. Didn't think he was going to be a 30-point game. I'm not sure he thought that. Regardless, though, was on the Lobos. It was a great call for him. And if you look at this, too, I think what's interesting, because part of the conversation on Twitter yesterday is now what happens to Nevada in terms of seeding, right? Because this is, by all counts, a bad loss. Mountain West is not a good conference. It's very down. And, yes, granted, if this is their one loss, but if they don't win the conference tournament, who knows what happens? They don't have respect for the teams, especially on the West Coast. It's been a bad year for the West Coast, and this does them no favors.
How about tell the story when you were young and stupid in college? Notre Dame, Alabama.
Oh, that one?
Yeah.
a bookie had to show up at my house. That was the end of the story. After a visit to a car dealership, yeah, I got suckered in on the 9.5 or whatever it was. I think I bought it to 10, thinking I was a genius. Minus 130 plus 10.
Yeah, like you can't lose, right? You're fired.
Wood, 13 grand to win 10. The biggest bet I'm out of college. That's more money than I had. I pulled it all together on credit, and then just halftime, I was upstairs eating room service. Like, God, kill me. It was over. It was 28 nothing, I think, or something.
So what? What's the end of the story? All of a sudden, you're like, there's a knockout.
I had a 91 original year Acura NSX, like the from the Pulp Fiction car. That thing. Had to go to drive it straight to the dealership. The guy was like, "I'll give you 15 grand for it." I was like, "All right." From him to the bookie, said, "All right, I'm not gonna do this for a while." But yeah, that was the low point of my. I said, "There's got to be a better way."
So just 17% of the time does the spread actually factor in. That's during the regular season. During the playoffs, that 83% actually grows higher. And it's never higher than it is during wild card weekend. Wild card weekend, the spread only matters roughly 11% of the time. 10 to 11% of the time. In other words, 9 out of 10 times. And this is obviously easier said than done. But if you ever wanted to distill wild card weekend into one line, this is it. 9 out of 10 times in the NFL historically, if you can just figure out who's going to win the game, that's the team you bet. Don't think about the spread. Does that make any sense?
Welcome back to the best of VSiN. Here are more of our favorite moments from the week.
Fire it up one more time. Let's hear it. Come on. We love the music. Guess the closing lines one more time for Sunday's 2 games. Yes, and the first one, a good one. The Chargers at the Patriots opened up 4.5 and immediately went down to a 4-point spread, and that's where we stand right now. This is also another one of these spots where it's pretty intriguing. 4, pretty solid number that you can grab with a team, especially a team like Phillip Rivers and the Chargers, who are phenomenal on the road. Now, 26-11-1 against the spread. Phillip Rivers is, last 5 years, as a road dog. 8-1 against the number away from Los Angeles. Remember, there's a neutral site in there because they played in London this year. Regardless, when it's not in Los Angeles, you can count on them to cover.
That's what they've been doing.
Yep.
Yeah, I mentioned this on the edge, but I'm not going in betting games when they open because of those types of trends or narratives or anything like that. And I didn't know the Chargers would be as public as it looks like they're going to be. But I thought +5, 4.5 was too high. So I had money on those bets. And at 4, it's still the Chargers lean. I think it should be a field goal flat, exactly, dead 3. And people are going to say, well, Tom Brady, Bill Belichick, off of a bye week in the playoffs at home in Foxborough. You know, the Chargers having to travel all the way back. I'm not sure if they stayed on the East Coast.
You know what?
Flew back.
I got to find that because that's something that was brought up during the week. And I think because there was a lot made of, oh my gosh, body clock, traveling East Coast, blah, blah. And Lombardi and I talked about it over the weekend. The big deal isn't so much traveling the first time to Baltimore. It's if you go back home and then travel back again to the East Coast.
You'd think they would just stay out there.
And I would think so too.
So if that's the case, I mean, all of those things line up. But I think people are going to say this is a short number. That was kind of my intention is, Tom Brady's only laying 4 to a Chargers team. Remember, the Chargers were 1 game from being the 1 seed. So people sometimes forget they were almost the best team in the AFC because of their record. And if you actually look at their net yards per play, offensively versus defensively, it did lead the league, the entire NFL, better than the Saints, Rams, because they have an actual defense and can still score to the likes of those teams like the Saints, Rams, Chiefs, Patriots. So the Chargers are really good. I just bet the 5, the 4.5. At 4, I would think there's going to be some sort of resistance eventually on Pats, right? Maybe it's 3.5 though. But maybe at 4, you get some people playing Pats and it bounces back to 4.5, and Chargers fans or bettors can snag it again. So I'm interested to see where this closes. My personal opinion is it should be a 3 flat. I'm going to say it closes though right at 4.
I'm looking here and it looks like the consensus. Yeah, the Chargers did travel back home, back home, and that's brutal, man. I mean that's 5.5 hours. What's it called? No, from they left Baltimore, that's about 6.5 hours back, and then you got to travel at some point again in the week. 5.5 hours there. I'm intrigued like why they didn't stay. We've seen teams in the past in the regular season, like the Raiders are the one that come to mind. Not last year, but the year before. They had a swing where I think they played Buffalo, and then they had to play Miami. And instead, they just went up there, played Buffalo, traveled to Florida, stayed there, then played Miami, and then came back
I'm
home.
guessing you just want familiarity with not only being home, but just regime practicing, organizing, prepping, game film, just having everything at your disposal at home, and then flying back over. But I agree. That's definitely a decision that had to have been made. They probably considered staying.
Let's add another wrinkle to it. Doesn't Rivers still live in San Diego? Oh, yeah. See, right? Okay.
He's going to drive back home.
Yeah, right? By the time he gets home, he's got to turn around.
Maybe he took an Uber this time.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, I don't know.
No, well, you know the story, right? That he has,
Maybe.
is it the RV or something like that? He has a custom vehicle in which he is driven to Los Angeles. I don't know by who. It might be his wife or whatever.
Okay.
But he has a film room set up in the said RV or some sort of, so
he's not,
mobile
he's not
vehicle.
wasting 2.5 3 hours a day.
So he's like there working on things.
Nice.
Other than having children. And so then he can actually get ready and, break down film of the New England Patriots. By the way, this is, again, it's funny when you talk about handicapping games because I like to use numbers, analytics, statistics as much as possible, but there's also the whole thing of just watching these teams. This is clearly the worst Bill Belichick team since the 2009 squad that was ousted in the wild card round against the Ravens, and that has something to do with it. When you've watched them against teams, and if you go back and you look at what the Patriots this season, because, yes, they were awful on the road this season, but I think that some of those games, there was a common theme in the games that they dropped. And think about it. They lost to the Jacksonville Jaguars. They lost a terrible game to the Detroit Lions at the beginning of the year. They lost to the Tennessee Titans on the road. These teams, the things that they have in common, the fact that they're physical at the line of scrimmage. They can push you around. You saw it. The Lions had their first 100-yard rusher in however many years it was on that Sunday night game. Was it week 2?
Oh, yeah, that's true. It was like
you know what
7
I mean?
seasons or something.
Exactly. And so that's the common theme. The Titans, just at the line of scrimmage, manhandled the New England Patriots. And the Chargers can do that. Melvin Gordon, I think, this offensive line, that's going to be something to watch because I think that's where they're going to have a lot of success is running this ball and just getting physical with them at the point of attack.
And if it comes down to weather and it's snowing and it comes down to a run game, then they obviously have the edge there on top of it. As much as Tom Brady and Bill Belichick can prepare with a bye week, their passing game is going to be their advantage, not the run game. So I agree with you there too.
Yep. So general consensus. So did you say you think it should be 3, but where do you think
I think it's going to close right at 4.
Right.
I think if it gets to 3.5, you'll see some Pats money. That's just my opinion.
Yeah.
But yeah, 4 is a good close.
Because that'll be, I think that immediately get bought back maybe to 4, so you'll be right. You can catch 4 with the Chargers. I don't think the 4.5's done, right?
I think you could pop back up maybe.
Yeah, during the week.
But then it'll come right back down again.
Okay. In terms of the total, we can throw that up one more time. If you're looking at it here at the South Point Hotel and Casino, total's 45.5. The story of where this ends up will be interesting too because generally, the Patriots average over 30 points per game when they play at home. Chargers are a very solid offensive team as well, but this opened up 47.5, dropped all the way to 45.5.
Yeah, the total, I think I mentioned on the edge, I bet under 48.5.
Yeah.
I thought the number was too high. I think 44.7 is actually my projection. So I have it even lower. If you have the weather issues, some wind, some cold, the snow, that was probably the biggest edge in the game. And unfortunately, I can only get a little bit down here in town because when I think it went up offshore, it was 47.5, and then it got bet immediately down to 46. So that's something to maybe look at live. If there's an early score, you can jump in and get a key number, get something like 49 or better live. But it's ultimately going to come down to some of the weather stuff. And generally, though, in these games, it's just a concept or narrative. We talked about it for Wild Card Weekend, but they start really slow. The teams kind of feel each other out.
Yep.
They're rarely scoring. And you saw even like the Ravens-Chargers, there was almost 35 points in the fourth quarter.
Yep.
I had the under in that game.
Seahawks second half against Cowboys.
Right, but
Yep.
they're starting slower, and the Pats haven't played anyone yet, and they're this is their first playoff game, so it's probably going to start slower anyway. So
Yep.
I wouldn't recommend anyone tries to hurry in betting game necessarily. To the over or anything. So yeah, I think it's gone. You're not going to get anything at 47 or better anymore.
Yeah, actually, to your point, other than the Colts game, which was the inverse, Colts started quick, and you got a pretty good clip in terms of in-game that you could go under with because they scored. It was the first 2 drives or 2 out of the first 3. Regardless, scoring was really quick for the Colts, and then nothing in the second half whatsoever. The other 3 games, you saw slow starts to each of them, and then quicker and more scoring in the third and fourth quarter.
I don't know how much of a coincidence it was or this season, but I know the Texans are one of the best second half teams against the spread. Their adjustments they made at halftimes were really strong. They had a few games where they were down at half, ended up winning, but they were covering a ton of them. So this is another one where the Colts seemed to move the ball fine in the entire second half. I know they probably were more conservative too, but the Texans shored up their defense, and they didn't give up another point the rest of the game. And they ended up getting a touchdown late and actually covering the second half spread. But
which, by the way, was garbage. You remember that one?
Yeah. Did you have action or anything?
No,
You're
I was watching it. And I was like, dude, come on.
It was like
The
3
officiating
or
is-
4 minutes left anyway.
Yeah.
It was a literal garbage touchdown anyway.
Yeah, in every sense of the word. All right, and then the last one on the board for the divisional round this weekend, it goes down in New Orleans, where the Saints will play host to the Philadelphia Eagles. The first two times these teams met, or the first time I should say these two teams met, in the regular season, New Orleans Saints dropped 48 on the Eagles. They were a 7-point favorite. They won 48-7 in a win, and of course the total still went under because the Eagles had nothing. The Saints now 8-point favorite, total of 50.5 in this one. And you had your great analogy of the kid flipping the coin.
Great.
Yeah.
Quotes.
It was solid.
It was all right. I'll try to say it again real quick, but I mean, I was just asking JVT because you say you had a coin that flips heads or tails 50-50, but you see this kid who whenever he flips it, he hits tails 80% of the time. But say they said, hey, we'll give you plus 105 on heads.
Yeah.
But this kid's flipping it. Would you feel comfortable betting heads when this kid always gets tails for whatever reason? It's a fair coin though, but this kid just always flips tails. So I made that comparison here where I think this number should be 10. I think the Saints should actually be a bigger favorite. I respect Nick Foles. I respect what the Eagles have done. It's only 8, and it was kind of similar with them. The Bears got bet up from 4.5, all the way up to 6.5 against the Eagles. Technically, the numbers, the metrics say the Saints should be, in my opinion, a double-digit favorite, but I am in no way comfortable betting -8 on the Saints against this Eagles team. I just can't do it. It's the kid that, for whatever reason, Nick Foles just doesn't lose playoff games, let alone covering over a touchdown.
Yep, and I completely agree. And the Bears game was a great example. Opening up 4.5, missed out on that, so I didn't get in. But my thought was, you just look across the board. This matchup favors the Bears. They're at home, better defensive team. Eagles can't run the ball, everything. And yet here we are, and the Eagles move on, eliminate the Bears, and now they get to take on the Saints. And so now that this is dropping, and I'm curious to see where this ends up. Opened up 9 at the Westgate, originally hung over there, and then now down to 8 in almost every single shop that you can see right now. And actually, Treasure Island has moved to 7.5. So now you have 7.5 up on the board with the New Orleans Saints.
And for what it's worth, if it's 7, I'm going to be betting Saints. I'll just have
It's
to
a
do
little,
it.
yeah.
I don't think it'll get there really, but if it really got to 7, I'm betting New Orleans. I just have to trust the numbers ultimately. But people will be saying, oh, well, it's not Trubisky, it's Drew Brees now, and they had a bye week, a rest week. So, I mean, they should take care of business. But then when Nick Foles wins this game on the final drive, down 4, and they win by 3, like no one's going to be shocked at all.
No, that'll be agonizing. But I'm with you. I think it looks like everything to me. Saints the right side, and like you said, your numbers project out to a double-digit spread. But
by the way, to pick the closing line, then
yeah,
I'm going to say the numbers guys come in and bet this.
Okay,
so I'm going to say 9.
Okay.
That's my guess for closing. I think it is going to come up still.
All right, that would make sense. But the fact that this is now 7.5, the best number that you can go find. So if you like the Saints, that sounds like it might not get any lower. So go ahead and lay 7.5 with the New Orleans Saints. 8 here at the South Point Hotel and Casino. Total 50.5. What do you look at with the total here? My first inclination was a little low.
Yeah, I think it should be an under.
Yeah, under?
Yeah, technically the numbers match up where mine's like 50.2.
Okay.
Yeah, 50.2. I bet a little 51.5 when it opened there, just as a small edge. But I think the matchup, and we talked about the slow starts.
Yeah.
You really cannot get out of an in-game under. Like if things start to pick up. We also talked about just the way Nick Foles and the Eagles play. One, their defense is healthier. Their secondary is playing fantastic. They're scheming great. The Saints are going to, and the Saints offense fell off the face of the earth down the stretch too.
Yep.
The Eagles are going to keep you in the game because they game control. Nick Foles doesn't make mistakes. They're going to run the ball. They're going to try to keep the Saints offense off the field as often as they can. I thought 51 was too high actually, 51.5. So I would be betting under, even at 50.5. If you wanted to bet on the total, it's under.
Saints ended the season 3-2 straight up, 1-4 against the number. In 3 of those games, they scored 14 points or fewer. The New Orleans Saints. So that is the drop in the scoring that we've seen. But 3 of those 5 games on the road. So we'll see if maybe that was just something. Because, again, remember the final game, Carolina Panthers, Drew Brees' company did not start. It was Teddy Bridgewater taking on, who's the kid from Houston and Texas A&M?
Kyle Allen.
Hey, Kyle Allen.
Yeah.
There you go.
Future MVP of the league, it looks like.
Oh, yeah. They were going nuts for him, man. They loved it. Cam Newton, watch your back, son. You got somebody sniffing.
That's right.
If you didn't catch VSiN last week, here's some of what you missed.
You love Clemson to win flat out here tonight. Tell our audience about that.
I do, Brent. This one reminds me like your old colleague at CBS, the late great Chick Anderson at the 1978 affirmed Alydar Belmont, and he said, we're going to test these two to the wire. Well, I think that's what we're going to get here tonight, and I think it's going to look a lot like the games 3 and 2 years ago when Deshaun Watson was there. I don't think it's going to look like last year's game because Kelly Bryant was overmatched. There's some things Bryant did well at quarterback for Clemson, and he had some moxie, he'd get out of the pocket. He was not a confident downfield thrower. Nick Saban realized that, and Bryant was a negative in that game. He couldn't do anything, and Saban realized it, and that was not a real pretty game to watch. It's completely different this year with Lawrence, and I think this kid is the bomb, and I think he's Watson-like, and in 2 years, like I joked over the weekend, I do a show in Denver, I said he'll be the first choice in the NFL draft in 2021.
I kind of want to bet Virginia.
Oh, will you stop it?
I kind of
Shut
do.
his mic off. Shut his mic off. Just became amateur hour. Come on.
I told you last year.
We got a great show. Don't make a comment like that. That's ridiculous.
Paul, if you don't think this team has come out this year.
Oh, here we go.
No. Just look at their scores this year. If you don't think this team is on a mission and pissed off about what happened as the only 1 seed to ever lose.
Oh, sure, yeah.
They are beating teams by 35 points.
They did the same thing last year. They ran right through the conference.
Not like this.
They ran right through the conference.
Not like this.
Oh, stop.
Paul, they were not like this. And by the way, I got news for you. They're way better offensively this year.
Yeah, well, okay, sure. We'll see.
I'm telling you, they are.
They do it every year. Oh, look at this. Virginia, great seed. Go down early.
You give me 20-1? Give me 25-1?
I'm not giving you anything. Doesn't translate.
You're scared, huh?
No, I'm not scared. Doesn't translate in March when you play that type of Mickey Mouse offense. You look up that half court, it's 50, 52, 50, and
that was their wake-up call.
Oh, okay.
That was the biggest wake-up call maybe ever in college basketball.
It's the exact. You know what? The exact opposite's going to happen about what you said. They're going to freak out because they're going to hear about it nonstop. Hey, you lost to a 16. There's going to be so much pressure on them. They're going to be tight, and they're going to lose again.
Nope,
they
disagree. It's going to be like this is going to be like Auburn losing to Central Florida last year. They've heard about it for an entire year. Came back. I know they were 7-5. That's not what I'm talking about. Auburn. Their bowl game. It was a mission to go up there and piss pound Purdue, and they did. And I think Virginia is going to be absolutely scary come March.